Hello and welcome to look number 3 with the newly released Petalmorphosis Mothership 12 from Pat McGrath Labs. I have one thing to add though. If you can hear background noise like someone playing a video game, that's because my son is here and he is playing a video game, so just FYI. The other thing I wanted to say is that several of you have requested additional swatches, like additional comparison swatches, including with a couple of like Lisa Eldridge eyeshadows. So I'm going to do those today because it is Saturday. I have nowhere to be. Well, I have somewhere to be, but I'm not in a hurry. So I have a little bit more time to do comparison swatches. So those of you who have requested additional comparisons, hang around until the end of the video because that's where I'm going to do them. Okay, I've zoomed you in and we can get started on the eye look. And something that I'm going to attempt today is to do a look which is a little bit lighter than the previous few that I have done, because something that I realized once I started using the palette is that I'm getting very much subversive vibes from this palette. Not in terms of the color story, I mean some of the colors are quite similar, but the vibe that I'm getting from this palette is your looks get real smoky real fast, because there are not, well, there are a couple of like lighter shades, but for one reason or the other I always end up with a really like dark smoky eye. So today I'm going to do my absolute best to do like a somewhat lighter look, and I do really want to try this eyeshadow here, the Rhapsody shade, as a liner. So for this first step I'm just going to take this shade here, the shade Divine Dawn, and I'm actually going to apply it all over my lids just using my fingers. And I kind of want to see what this shade does on its own, because it's a little bit difficult to tell what the flip is. I feel like there's a little bit of like a purpley flip to it. Yeah, there's definitely like a pinky purpley flip to it. And something else that I have noticed, I mentioned a couple of times that this shade gives me like skin show vibes. But one thing that I notice here is the difference in, maybe there's like a subtle difference in the formula here, because this feels a lot smoother and a lot creamier than the traditional skin show shades in Pat's collection. Usually the skin show shades are some of the most powdery eyeshadows in the palette, and I don't get that feeling with the shade Divine Dawn. The shade Divine Dawn is actually quite creamy to the touch. The next step is going to be dipping into the absolute littlest, tiniest bit of this shade here, the shade Lunar Nectar, because I wanted to start the look off with a very light base, and I don't want too much of Lunar Nectar. I knew that if I go straight in with Lunar Nectar I'm going to apply quite a bit of it, but I actually just want it as like the tiniest little accent here through the crease. So the two shades are going to mix a little bit. I think that's a little bit the idea. So just a very light little eye look here. I think so far this is looking quite nice and one of the lightest looks that I have done. Other people's reviews have started to come out, and it is painfully obvious that everyone is really missing the Baked Blitz Astro shades. I haven't seen a single review from the few people that I have watched who hasn't mentioned that while this is a good palette, we can't really find fault in terms of the quality. One can really feel the lack of the Blitz Astro shades. They just added that magical last touch that her current formula, the one that it was introduced with Moonlit Seduction, just cannot really give to you. This is actually really pretty. If you wanted to go for the absolute lightest daytime appropriate look, you could stop here, just apply Divine Dawn in your inner corners, a bit more of Lunar Nectar on your lower lashes, call it a day, and here you have a very like office appropriate look, if I may call it that. But obviously you shouldn't buy the palette for these couple of shades, because I mean the rest of the palette is what really makes this palette so incredibly interesting. So if you're not interested in the greens and you want a daytime appropriate look, this is not the palette. Okay, next I'm going to take an absolute touch of the NYX glitter glue, and when I say a touch I really mean the absolute lightest bit of it, because I want to experiment with layering a bit of the peachy shade, the Astral, what is it called again? Astral Sunset Splendor. I want to layer a bit of Astral Sunset Splendor over top of the Divine Dawn shade, because I think the two are going to make a really pretty combo. So I'm going to take, just on my finger again, this peachy shade, and I'm going to start working the two together. I might go back and forth a couple of times just so I get a nice little like blend between the two, because I don't want Divine Dawn to disappear completely. I just kind of want to marry the two shades to create like this light champagne, purpley, orangey flipping shadow, if that makes any sense to anyone. And just using my finger, because I feel like especially when you layer shades like this and you want to marry the two eyeshadows sort of into like one color, using your fingers is your best bet. I think that just kind of melts the textures together. I'm going to take a little bit of Lunar Nectar to apply on my lower lashes, just as a little kiss. And today is also finally going to be the day that I don't use Astral Iridescent Iris. Not even a little bit of it. I'm going to lay off. I can do it. And there he is. Hey boef. Kom je even zwaaien? Hallo beer. Hi beer. I'm going to take a little bit of Divine Dawn here to apply in my inner corners before we go into Blitz Radiant Rhapsody to apply as a liner, because I think that is going to look really fun. And now I am going to take, do I want to layer this one and this one together, or do I just want the Rhapsody shade on its own? You know, I'm going to apply a little bit of this one just as a base, just so we have a nice dark green base. And I'm taking that on like a little smudger type brush. This one is just from Spectrum Collections, but it doesn't really matter. It can also be like a liner brush. But I'm going to keep it a little bit like smokier, not super structured. Just take it a bit outwards. And I'm just applying a kiss of this shade. You could also apply only this shade. Lievert?
What?
I'm sorry, it's a Saturday, so it's really chaotic around here. I think this also looks really pretty because the Nocturnal Bloom shade, the dark green matte, has a bit more of like a desaturated feel to it. So you can see it's not really bright. This is really pretty. I really like this. So I'm very happy that I actually tried it because I really wanted to see the effect of the two eyeshadows. But now I'm going to dip the absolute tiniest bit into Blitz Radiant Rhapsody, and I'm going to layer that over the Nocturnal Bloom shade, just to see, you know, what the two do together as a liner. But again, I'm not going to overdo it. I'm just going to apply a tiny bit as a little accent. I'm sorry, I told you it's a chaotic Saturday, and as hard as he's trying, my son really isn't the quietest person. He's 6.5 in his defense. So I'm just going to smoke that out a bit. Oh, I love where this look is going. It's so soft and pretty with that little accent of green aqua. Super pretty. You know what? I'm just going to leave it at this. I'm not going to touch anymore. I'm not going to intensify anything. I'm very happy with the way this looks now. I'm going to finish off with a bit of mascara, and I'll be back to do the comparison swatches. So this is the final look. I really enjoy how the look turned out. I'm absolutely loving that little green liner moment. In case anyone was curious, on my lips I have my beloved Painterly, one of the luxuriously loosens from Lisa Eldridge. And I think we can just immediately move on to the comparison swatches. I'm first going to do a couple of extra comparison swatches from Pat McGrath Labs palettes, and then we're going to move on to Lisa Eldridge and actually Wycon. Some of you requested also Wycon comparisons. Now, one of you mentioned that they would like to see the apricot shade, the Sunset Splendor shade from the new palette compared to Inferno from the Decadence palette. And I must say I was a little bit puzzled by this comparison because I don't think they're going to be similar at all. For one, the Sunset Splendor shade has a very like light, almost pastel base, whereas Inferno from the Decadence palette clearly has a very dark smoky base to it. So the shadow I'm referring to is this one here. Alright, so here you have the Sunset Splendor and this is Inferno. Inferno, if you guys didn't know it, is one of my absolute favorite eyeshadows from the Decadence palette because I absolutely love that smoky base with the peachy, rosy overlay. But you can see like To me, these are not similar at all. Maybe the overlay looks a little bit similar, but Inferno is such a different shade because of that smoky base to it that I don't consider these to be even close to each other. But hey, there you have it. Next, I had a request to compare the shade Blitz Bordeaux from the Iconic Illumination Quad to the Bordeaux shade in Petalmorphosis. So we're talking about this one here. This is one of the original, the only like Blitz Astral Quad. So this is in the baked formula, which obviously is superior in every way, but I don't think they're similar. The Blitz Bordeaux shade is an actual like red. You can see this is Cosmic Fantasies from the Petalmorphosis palette, and this is Blitz Bordeaux from Iconic Illumination. I think the Cosmic Fantasies shade is clearly a purple, whereas Blitz Bordeaux is clearly a red. There you have it, not similar at all. I want to say one of you also mentioned that they would like a comparison of Night Creature to the new purple from Petalmorphosis. So since I swatched the one from Petalmorphosis, let's quickly swatch this one too, which I think yet again is a different kind of purple. This is much more like a magenta orchid purple, but let's swatch that as well right here. So here you have Night Creature. Night Creature is just a little bit brighter. This one is quite smoky. This one has a smoky base as well, but not as smoky as this. And this clearly has like a lighter color of the glitter. So it comes across as much more of like a magenta purple than it really does darker purple. Okay, I have Betty and Sorcery here. And I don't know that I see much similarities. I mean, we could compare Posh and Starlet to the bronzy shade and the iris shade in the new palette, but other than that, I don't think there's any similarity whatsoever. So let's just quickly compare those. Let's start with the bronzy shade. So this is the bronzy shade from Petalmorphosis. This is Posh from Betty. Posh from Betty is just fucking fantastic. This shade has a lot of like pink and silver sparkle to it, so it is really much brighter than the bronze in Petalmorphosis, and also has like a much rosier tone to it. This is more of like a neutral bronzy brown. So this here is Iris, this here is Starlet. Iris, Petalmorphosis, Starlet, Betty. There are some similarities, but I think the shade from Pat McGrath Labs is a lot cooler in the purple flip. It's a lot chunkier. It has a completely different texture to it also. Like Betty has that light mint gray base and the sparkle on it, and it is a much smoother type of texture. So this also just creates a somewhat different effect on the lid. I think this is much easier to use for layering and fairy dusting, whereas this, you can definitely use this for layering, but the texture just allows a little bit less for that fairy dusting effect. And I guess from Sorcery we have the couple of greens. So we have this row right here that we can compare to the greens in Petalmorphosis. The dark green from the Lisa Eldridge palette, very different texture. This is one of those like latexy mattes that is almost a little bit difficult to pick up. So here you have the green from Sorcery, here you have the green from Pat McGrath Labs. Let me give them a quick swatch. I'm sorry, you can see a little bit of glitter in here. It's not because the shade has any glitter to it, but because there is glitter all over my hand. I do think these are actually rather similar to each other, because they both have a little bit of like a blue undertone to them. I think this one just has a slightly more intense blue undertone and is a little bit more saturated. The shade from Pat is just such a unique green. I have simply fallen in love with this Nocturnal Bloom shade because it is such an incredibly unique green. There is something about the desaturated tone of this shade that makes it incredibly unique. I really like it. And I've actually been curious myself to compare to my little single here from Dior in the shade Lucky Clover, because I still think Lucky Clover doesn't have that same desaturated quality, but I was just really curious. Okay, you can see Lucky Clover has a little bit of the desaturated base, but it also has like that dark forest green sheen, so it almost appears to be a bit more satin in nature. I mean, they're all really close to each other. If you put them on your eyelids, are you really going to see that much of a difference? But with that, I maintain that Nocturnal Bloom is a really interesting and really unique green. And because I love my green so much, I think I'm entitled to being extra nerdy when it comes to green. Let's swatch the shade Grotto, which is the metallic-y green here, compared to Blitz Radiant Rhapsody. Don't think they're similar at all. Sorcery, Petalmorphosis. No, there's absolutely zero similarity here. And finally, of course, the ones that do look somewhat more similar to each other and probably are going to have a very similar effect are Madrigal, so the olivey green here, and the Astral Eden Envy shade from Petalmorphosis. Let me grab that too. This is Sorcery, this is Petalmorphosis. You can see these are much closer. Where do I do this? Let's do this right here. This is Madrigal, and this is Petalmorphosis. Petalmorphosis has possibly a bit of a darker olive green base, so it is less bright than Madrigal. And I was also asked to compare the Wycon Visionary eyeshadow in the shade Golden Army, so this one here. And in case this is your first time and you've never heard me talk about the Visionary eyeshadows from Wycon, these are essentially dupes for the Blitz Astral baked shades from Pat McGrath Labs in a very affordable price range. So these are single eyeshadows that cost about 15 euros. They're completely different textures. Obviously, I'm very partial to the Blitz, like the baked formula from Wycon, but I don't find them to be all that similar in the grand scheme of things. So this is Petalmorphosis and this is Wycon. Wycon also has a very interesting sparkle to it, because it has sparkle that resembles Gigabyte from the Subversive palette, but it also has this like more blue tone sparkle and almost like a little bit of purple to it that makes it a very interesting shade. So I think the similarity between the two is of course that they're both olive greens, but I think ultimately they are not the same type of shadow. And the final comparison is this shadow from Wycon. I cannot remember the name of it, I can tell you the number. It is the Visionary eyeshadow in the number 09. Now I'm not entirely sure what you wanted me to compare this to. I'm guessing Blitz Radiant Rhapsody. So I'm going to grab a bit of Blitz Radiant Rhapsody and a bit of this shade. I don't think that they're super similar, but there you go. Blitz Radiant Rhapsody and whatever this shadow is called from the Wycon Visionary eyeshadows. I hope this video was useful. I hope you enjoyed the look. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about the look. I think I've covered pretty much all the extra comparison swatches that were requested, but do let me know if there's anything I missed. And like I said also in the previous video, if you want me to do it immediately, just send me a message, like DM me on Instagram, and I can immediately send you some comparison swatches. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!